Afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar brought to you by the Centre for Excellence in Rural Sexual Health. I want to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the various lands and waterways across Australia. Oh, my apologies. I've just had a notification that it wants to record on my computer. I will begin again. That I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the various lands across Australia, paying my respects to elders past, present, and future, and acknowledging the importance of Indigenous knowledge in this field of sexual health in which we work. Today, we have Leon Huxtable here with us, presenting Screen Smarts, Empowering Young People to Navigate Sexual Health Content Online Responsibly. Leon is a Schools and Community Educator at Sexual Health Victoria, where he has worked since 2022. Leon was previously a secondary school teacher working in New South Wales and Victoria. His research interests include education around sexual content online and working with migrant and refugee communities. I would like to let you know that this session is being recorded and it will be on our YouTube channel. So if you do not want to be recorded, please turn your camera off. Leon's asked that you put your questions in the chat during the session and there'll be some time at the end to answer those. I'm going to hand over to you now. Thank you, Leon.
Lovely. Thank you, Ashley. Thank you for that lovely welcome and that lovely bio that I definitely wrote about myself. It's nice to hear those words read back to me, though, at any given time. Thank you all so much for coming along today. So, yep, my name is Leon. My pronouns are he, him, and I work for Sexual Health Victoria. And I'm going to talk to you about socializing online, sexual content online, and how to work with young people in that space. When I do presentations, I always start with a joke about being told to dress for the job that you want. Today I think I'm channeling both Dr. Carl, which is a joke I've made before, but also Britney Spears because I'm wearing my headset mic. So I'm trying to bring together two passions of Dr. Carl and Britney Spears in one presentation. So with the presentation today, the goal is to have a brief understanding
Hey,
and discussion around some
we good?
of the
Yeah.
research that is out there already, and especially the research around what young people themselves are saying. And then we'll also look at some of the ways that we can work with young people to help them stay safe online as well. So hopefully walking away with some practical steps and tips to help you in that space. So just as we go into the session, just something for you to keep in your mind and be aware of as we go through is I just want you to reflect on these two things as we go through the session today. So one of them is in your role as an individual person outside of work, what things come to mind for you when we look at the topic of sexual content online and young people specifically? And then I also want you to think about your professional role and what things you consider when you respond to questions about sexual content online from young people. Some of you may have had lots of experience answering questions around these topics with young people. For some of you, it could be a new topic altogether. So, as I said, I just want you to keep that in mind. You can write it down for yourself if you want to at the start of the session as we go through, because it helps to, I think, frame some of the discussions that we'll have about this topic. So the first thing to look at is the current research landscape. And the first bit is looking at research that is maybe a bit broader and not so young person focused, and then bringing it back to the research that I love to talk about, which is focused on young people themselves. So to help with our discussion, there'll be a couple of times where I'll give you some definitions for the terminology that I'm using. So when I'm talking about sexual content online, I'm using this as an umbrella term. So this umbrella term includes images or videos or text or audio that have a sexual nature to them. It includes consensual materials, so things like pornography and sexting, but it also includes non-consensual material, so child sexual abuse material, image-based abuse material as well. So it's an important umbrella term, I think, to have so that we can encapsulate everything in one discussion. But I will also break down some of these terms in not too long as we go through to talk about the difference between the consensual and the non-consensual material as well. So the main definition that has to come up, and the one that we talk about the most when we talk about pornography. So when we're talking about pornography, we're talking about sexual content that's designed for arousal. It has that same list of things that it could be that I said for sexual content online, of images, videos, text, audio, and it's produced and distributed with the consent of all people involved. And that's a really important part of this discussion, because when I talk about pornography, I'm only talking about consensual material, because that's the definition of pornography that I'm using. When I'm talking about pornography, I'm not including sexual violence, abuse, child sexual abuse material, image-based abuse, or child exploitation material. That is a separate discussion. They are all their own kind of area to talk about. And a lot of the words there, or the terms there, are newer terms that have been created to stop kind of conflating the term pornography with non-consensual material. So we're no longer using the term child porn or child pornography. That's when we're talking about child sexual abuse material or child sexual exploitation material. And we're not saying revenge porn anymore. We're talking about image-based abuse instead. So it's really helpful to understand that there is a difference between the consensual discussion of pornography and then the non-consensual activities that are happening online as well. So a little bit of context in terms of how I ended up focusing a bit more on this space and spending my time talking about this topic all the time is that I saw these statistics everywhere. I saw them on different websites. I saw them in different discussions, in papers, in presentations, and I wanted to understand what they meant, because looking at these stats, I felt the concern that I think most people feel when they look at these statistics. What was missing a lot of the time from when the stats were presented was the box in the top left-hand corner. So the one that says it was 196 videos and 46 hours of data. So this research, it's a great bit of research that I recommend people have a look at, because it has three parts to it, but it's from New Zealand, and it was called Breaking Down Porn. And it focused just on 196 videos that were on Pornhub on the day that they decided to look at the research, and it was what was most popular in New Zealand. And from those videos is where they have the breakdown of the statistics of 3% showing condom use, 46% showing step or family fantasies, 10% showing physical aggression, 29% some form of affection, and 35% containing some non-consensual behavior. So it is not to say that these statistics are not still concerning, because we want to make sure that the content that people are viewing and seeing is consensual and showing pleasure and being focused on those positive aspects. But it's to say that, 10%, 46% is a very small number of videos when we're looking at only 196 videos. Out of the 10% of videos that showed the physical aggression, they broke it down further, and it was about half of those videos that were showing what they labeled as consensual aggression as well. So when we're presented with statistics without any background context or nuance, I think it can change the way that we think about this topic, and it can also change the way that we talk about it with young people. If we go in with these statistics without context, I think it can come across in a way that might increase feelings of shame or stigma for young people, rather than giving them a space where they feel like they can talk about it, and giving us a space to be able to educate them on it as well. So as I said, this is kind of how I ended up on my path. I found this, I went down the rabbit hole, and in this piece of research as well, when you, when you read it, the opening discussion from the classification office is talking about the fact that they were surprised that there was actually more of a positive focus in what they were looking for, in terms of the fact that most people were looking for those positive representations of affection or kind of romanticism or things like that. And again, that's something that I think has been missed when the data has been shared further. In terms of what I would say my view of the media landscape is, and possibly a view that other people share, is that when people talk about pornography, and especially young people, it ends up in this discussion. I've taken this from the pyramid of violence, and so they say, pornography is the root of all these problems, and from pornography, it's straight into physical expressions of assault, and then we end up in the top tier of homicide, suicide. So this is my reworking of the pyramid based on what I feel like I am hearing and seeing when people are talking about pornography. And as I said, especially with young people, and especially at the moment where it's quite a hot topic that is talked about. The reality is that this is the pyramid of violence in its truest form, or in one of its forms, is that there are lots of steps on the pyramid, and there are lots of chances for us to have interventions with young people to work with them and make sure they're making more positive, safer choices for themselves. And so in this version of the pyramid, it has porn in the second tier. It specifically labels violent porn, which is a whole discussion of violent and non-violent pornography that I won't spend time getting into today because that's probably a whole presentation on its own. But you can see it is one part of a much larger area that requires people to do work from all areas, and it requires policy changes, it requires educational changes, it requires a lot of work for society to help people on the whole to be able to combat violence, aggression, and assault. So it's just, again, a little bit of that context of saying there's not just one root cause that is the problem. And by taking that away or targeting that, we're not solving the problem because we're missing out on all of these other areas and these possibilities for intervention that we have. And so it's, I guess, either stepping back and looking at the larger picture or sometimes narrowing in a bit more and looking at the kind of context and information that we have. So with some of the research that's there, most of the research that I present in this section is from more scoping studies or systematic reviews. So the research indicates that pornography can impact the way that young people, their experiences or their thoughts around knowledge and awareness and education of sex, or their attitudes or beliefs to sex, but also about gender as well. It puts them in the should category sometimes of what they think certain sexual behaviors, practices should be, and it can also influence their feelings around sexual aggression, mental health, and well-being as well. So that's, again, kind of broadly agreed upon in terms of what the research points to. The other side of that, though, is that the research also points to the fact that when we focus on pornography's impact on young people's beliefs of gender stereotypes about sex and their way it influences their sexual activities and practices, we have inconsistent data. So we have some places that say it goes this way, that way, where you can't really agree on that one altogether. Now, this person is not a relative of mine. It's just someone else with a beard who's got less hair. So it kind of resembles me. Get two of me for the price of one. When we look at the research that talks about relationships between young people, porn, and sexual violence perpetration, there is consistency in that research. However, it is dependent on a range of all these other intersecting factors. So the sex and the gender of the participant, the type or frequency of the porn that was watched, the predisposition to violence or aggression, and the nature of previous sexual experiences. So again, it's not just interacting with this content that leads to this idea of sexual violence perpetration. There are all these other factors that are coming in here as well that we can spend time targeting and educating around and focusing on to help young people, again, be safe, make better decisions, which is hopefully the goal for all of us here. So I don't spend a lot of time talking about that kind of research for the main reason that the research is often focused on people who are over the age of 18, which is not very helpful for me as someone who works in schools with people under the age of 18. It's often looking at people over the age of 18 and saying, what was your experience of pornography when you were a teenager? And you and I know that that experience is very different because of how rapidly technology moves. So someone who's 18 right now, their experience is very different to the 15-year-olds right now. And someone of my age, the experience is very different to when I was 15. And so I find it really difficult to use this research to in a I guess a richer way with young people because I feel like it's not reflecting them and their experiences right now. Also, it's an argument of whether it's meant to or not, but the research doesn't focus on how to help young people or how to work with young people a lot of the time. Whether that's the place of research or not, I'm not sure. But as someone who wants to be working in the classrooms with the young people, I'm often looking for some extra information and tips from the researchers on how to work with them. So I get to my one Simpsons GIF, which you've always got to have a good GIF in a presentation, which is what are the young people themselves actually saying? And this is the research that I find the most interesting, the most useful, and the research that I think is better presented to the young people themselves because it's often reflecting them rather than presenting them with all these stats and data that don't necessarily relate to their experience. So this quote, I kind of say is one of my guiding quotes in terms of the work that I do. A lot of the time, I would say that my work in this space is just kind of either alerting people or reminding people that young people aren't blobs that just sit there and take in media and have no thought around it. Young people are critical consumers. Young people are excellent in so many ways, and their minds are excellent too. And so they are able to distinguish between pornography and what they're seeing in pornography, and then what they're engaging with in their own relationships. Now, they still obviously need assistance and education and help, but we can target that help with the understanding that they're coming from a position of knowledge already. I think that if we talk down to young people, or as I said, if we do view them as the blobs that don't have critical thought, we're going to spend a lot of time educating them on things that they already know or they're already familiar with. So by starting at this position of them having the knowledge and the ability already, I think we can build much more uh, nourishing and worthwhile education with them starting from this point. So the e-safety commissioner did some research in 2023 with 16 to 18-year-olds. So we're in a good bracket here for me because these are young people who are still in school. And it found that of the people that were surveyed, 75% of them had encountered online pornography already. And it said that 39% of them had seen it before they were 13. So these are stats that we're probably pretty familiar with and that we've seen around, or variations of this. We know that young people are accessing or seeing pornography. You can see that I've underlined the word encountered there, and I've done that because I really want to draw attention to the language that is used specifically by eSafety a lot of the time, which is rather than talking about exposure, they're talking about encounters, because exposure, again, has an inherently kind of negative focus, whereas encounter can encompass both possible negative activities or young people searching it out themselves. Because you can see there that with the encounters, there's accidental encounters, but then there's encounters through sharing, which again can be consensual or non-consensual. And then there's the intention there where young people will go and seek out this content on purpose. It's also showed that in terms of where it was being accessed, primarily, as we would expect, most of it is being accessed through pornography sites, but there is also a large chunk of it being accessed through social media as well. Most social media platforms will have some policy around nudity or pornography. Some of them don't, and even the ones that do, it still gets through, and it can take quite some time for it to be removed. So because young people are already there, that's where they might be seeing it. In that research as well, luckily for any of us that are working in the space of relationships and sexuality education, young people thought that it's pretty helpful, which is good news for me. It'll keep me in work. It also showed that they thought that there could be negative impacts on understandings of consent, ideas of intimate relationships, expectations of sex, or views on gender stereotypes. And I usually talk about that in the shoulds. I feel like when we look at that, it's a whole bunch of shoulds that they think they should be doing, rather than giving young people an understanding of choice and being able to make their own decisions. 51% of the young people that were surveyed saw there were some positives when it came to pornography. And we know from this research and other research that oftentimes LGBTQIA plus young people are more likely to report positive experiences or effects of pornography, oftentimes because they're seeing practices or bodies represented that they're not seeing represented anywhere else. The focus group also noted that sometimes pornography is a source of pleasure or of entertainment or self-gratification. So I think it's helpful for us and for young people to, again, see how young people are actually thinking about or viewing pornography. The largest source of information that we have is the research from La Trobe through Arches, so the Australian Research Centre in Sex, Health and Society. And yes, I know that acronym off the top of my head. It's not just because it's on the screen in front of me. But this one was with 14 to 18-year-olds in 2022, and they had, it was about 6,000 or so participants. And so of those participants that they surveyed in Australia, about 85, 86% of them had seen pornography at some point. In terms of their frequency of viewing, I also think that these numbers are quite interesting because I think that when it's talked about in the media or more broadly, it sounds like it's something that young people are doing every single day. They're doing it constantly. They're in the classroom, they're in the back of the car, and they're always looking at pornography. But the young people here, and again, obviously it's self-reporting, but they're saying that really it's in more of a less than monthly, weekly category. Daily is quite low. And then there's actually like a high proportion being in the never category as well. The reasons why young people watch pornography is also helpful for us to know when it comes to pitching education, because a lot of the points here, I would say, lean more towards being, I guess, neutral or potentially positive. Sad and lonely, that's probably more, I guess, on the negative side of things. And boredom could be either way, but wanting to learn about pleasure, about sexual practices, how to give pleasure, for curiosity, I would say are all traits that we're usually looking to teach young people about. Now, pornography is not made to be an educator and is not the best educator necessarily, but they're usually going to pornography as a source of education because, in the eyes of young people, relationships and sexuality education is usually missing the mark for them. It's not talking about the things or talking in the way that they want to talk about it, which is usually they want to be pretty explicit. They want everything to be black and white, and they want to know a lot about relationships more than necessarily, how babies are made, depending on how old they are. And then the open text response that was in that survey for young people is where we got a few more ideas of their reasons for watching pornography. So we've got discussions of masturbation, we've got discussions of watching it for the lols, for the humor, and then there is discussions of someone showing them, which again, that could be in a consensual or non-consensual capacity, accidentally clicking the link, exploring things that arouse them. And then we do have the language of addiction coming through as well, which is, again, a whole separate discussion and presentation around the language of addiction in terms of pornography and whether that language is the best language to use. But young people are going to reflect the language that they're hearing used around them. So I think that's why we see it come across in this open text response as well. So that's the research that I think is helpful in shaping our discussion. I think it's helpful to know the broader research, and as I said, for me, where I feel like there are some shortcomings, and then I feel like it's really helpful for us to know what young people are actually saying, and in a pretty relevant and recent surveys. And we've got more Arches data that will come out next year, and so we'll have again more data that we can use to talk to young people and help with their education. So, based on that research and what we've heard from young people, the question is then, well, what topics do we focus on when we're talking with them about sexual content online? And it's a pretty easy answer, because the answer is everything that they told us that they wanted to talk about already in the survey data. So, because they feel like pornography could be influencing attitudes and expectations, understandings of consent, ideas about intimate relationships, and views on gender stereotypes, I would say that those are the topics that we should be targeting. So again, trying to step away from should discussions, step away from discussions of what is normal, what is not normal, and trying to just present young people with lots of knowledge and lots of information so that they can make informed choices and they can make choices that are safer for them. And also, as we'll talk about, decisions that fit within legal frameworks too. So based on what the young people say, I'd say we can start here. Now, in saying that, as I said, young people are great, but we are also knowledgeable professionals and experts in our fields. And so based on our knowledge, I would also say that there is a need for us to talk about pleasure, which young people have brought up in that discussion, but talking about pleasure in general is what we're trying to aim for more with discussions in relationships and sexuality education. Looking at the fact that they might not see various sexual practices presented. So again, it's not just one way for people to engage. There are lots of ways that people can engage. There are lots of body shapes and sizes and different bodies for everybody. Talking to them about help seeking, because as great as young people are, they're usually pretty bad at help seeking. And so giving them an understanding of the pathways, who they can go to, and being really clear on who they can go to and how to ask for help. Personal content creation will depend primarily on your role and how old the young people are. Because in terms of legalities, it's for people who are over 18. We know that there are some young people who are under 18 who have made content that has been sold and things like that, which obviously doesn't fit within our legal frameworks. But if you're working with young people who are in the kind of, 18 to 25 age bracket, it might be something that's more relevant to discuss. And it's a question that young people might ask in earlier settings like high school as well. Artificial intelligence, I've got some slides that I'll touch on about that in not too long, but it's obviously pretty hot as a topic in general right now, but it is also a hot topic in terms of talking about sexual content online and the possible negative or sometimes positive impacts that AI can have in that space. And then it is important that we talk to young people about laws. They might not realize it, but once you get into a classroom and talk with young people about law, that's when they get really engaged. They have a million questions. And as I said, they really struggle because laws are not as black and white as they would like them to be. And they're also trying to often make sense of gray areas of life with black and white laws. So, if we're going to target these areas, as I said, the next kind of slides and topics will be hopefully giving a bit of extra information or tips that will help us to be able to have these conversations. So the main buzz around the online space at the moment is the social media minimum age laws that are going to be coming in. You might have heard it called the social media ban or the social media delay. There's lots of language around it. So this law is due by the 11th of December this year. And when it comes in, the goal of this law is that it will have platforms having to take reasonable steps that will prevent users who are under the age of 16 from having accounts on their platforms. And the main thing that we need to be aware of and that we need to be talking about with parents, carers, and young people and professionals is that the responsibility is going to be on the service providers, on the applications, on the social media, on the websites, not on the parents, carers, or the children. So if there is any legal ramification or anything that needs to follow up, it's about the service provider and saying, well, how did this young person end up with an account on your service? This is a very short slide for a very big topic because we don't have a lot of certainty just yet. They're still going through the process of consultation. We're still waiting to see what the laws will actually look like because they've got until December to come up with them. This is about as much as I think is relatively set in stone right now, but every couple of days I feel like there's a new article that talks about something that might have changed in the discussion about what is going to counter social media, what's going to be included. So it's just hopefully a bit of a helpful snippet. And the main thing that, as I said, I'd take away is helping young people and their trusted adults to understand that the responsibility is not on them. So I think early on the discussion was people going, well, how are they policing young people and their parents and carers, and what's the reprimand look like? But it's actually focusing on service providers and taking action there. In terms of using the internet or online tools, young people might be using them to access health information, doing a quick Google search, finding relevant health services that are in their area that might tick the boxes for what they're after. They might be using it just to stay connected with their friends, family, partners. They find communities that might not exist for them in their area, or they might not feel comfortable engaging within their immediate area. And it might be a place where they go to express themselves. So one of the potential risks that will happen with online restrictions is that young people might lose some of these spaces, which is going to be really important for any of us working in the community spaces or outreach programs to make sure that these spaces are still available for young people to go to and make connections if they're not able to do it online. Now, I say not able to do it. They've already seen that people are going to be using VPNs and they'll find other ways around it. And since the good old days of MySpace and things, people have been lying about their age to make accounts. So I'm sure it will not stop young people dead in their tracks, but it's about making sure that we're giving them lots of options for where they can go. 1-800-MY-OPTIONS is there. It's mentioned. If you're not familiar with it, it's a great number to call and also website for people who are looking for health services in their area, and it will provide them with information on where they can go and get certain help depending on what sexual health services that they're after. It presents it as a map, or as they call, they'll be able to find out. And sometimes practitioners aren't listed on the website, but they'll be listed if they make the phone call. Because we're obviously doing this through search, and so there's a focus of talking about rural or regional communities. I think having something like 1-800-MY-OPTIONS is always really good to have on hand to talk with young people about if they are looking for sexual health services. And I think, you know, the research says that in regional communities or rural communities, that young people don't tend to do a lot of using online health services necessarily, but it definitely had a bit of an upswing after COVID. And so I think it's probably something that is on the rise, but might be impacted by these changes in laws. Some other online topics to discuss and some quick definitions to be able to keep in your mind. Sorry, I should have mentioned as well, this is being recorded and you get a copy of the slides too. So if I breeze past things, you can look back over it later on. But talking about hackers, especially young people in primary school, they always say that hackers are the most concerning thing about online activity. They don't want their information hacked. Catfishing is when someone pretends to be another person, so fake profiles or fake accounts, and then they try to hook someone in, and usually there's another kind of end goal for them. Grooming is that building up of trust with from someone who is over 18 with someone who is under 16 to try to elicit sexual contact. With grooming, the contact doesn't have to take place for it to be going through the legal processes. It's just the initiation of that contact. Sextortion is a form of blackmail, so sexual extortion. It's usually, again, it's someone catfishing a young person. The main group that we see targeted by this are young men between the ages of like 15 to 24. It's one of the few areas in research where young men are the ones that are more targeted by this. And so someone will pretend to be another person, ask them for a nude image. As soon as they get the nude image or the video, they say, if you don't give me this much money, I'll share that with everybody that you know. Young people have taken their lives based on these things happening for them. And a really important thing around sextortion is trying to reduce the fear of digital footprints, because young people are really afraid that if one nude gets out there, that ruins their life and their career and everything they've ever kind of worked towards. And so reducing the importance placed on digital footprints can kind of help with some of those fears that young people might feel around these processes happening around sextortion. And then deepfakes, that comes into our discussion of AI. So it's using technology to create photos or videos or sound files that look like it's one person delivering it, but it's not from them. This used to be a much harder process. This used to take a lot longer and required some skills, but now AI makes it accessible for all people. You've possibly seen some great examples. One of the great examples that I have been shown is the Tom Cruise account on TikTok. It is not Tom Cruise, but it looks a lot like him. And so AI is very capable of making deepfake content and very quickly. The sexting laws in Australia, I'll break it down for Australia, I'll break it down for Victoria as well. But the sexting laws across Australia say that people under 18, if there's any sexual content of someone 18, it's considered child sexual abuse material, and that people under the age of 18 can't consent to sexual content being published or shared. Once people are over 18, they can consent to their content being published or shared. And at any age, if people's content is published, shared, or if their images, they've got altered images as well, that can be part of the image-based abuse laws if those things are happening without consent. Also important to note that AI is covered in the image-based abuse laws. It just might not look as clear as we want it to, but that counts as altered images. In Victoria, there's an exception that exists for people under the age of 18. And if these kind of dot points are met, that there's no threat or fear, there's no more than that 2-year age gap, there's no adult involved, and there's no other criminal act being depicted, they can sometimes have this exception applied for people under 18 so that they're not going through the legal process of being charged. Anecdotally, I've heard that most of the time we're looking to not charge young people under these laws, so we're going to work with the exception in Victoria, but it is kind of up to the discretion of the people that are taking them through that legal process on whether they're strictly following the Australian laws or they're applying the Victorian exception. So important for young people in Victoria to know, and if you're in different states or territories, looking at if there are any extra laws to add into the discussion that are outside that federal law that's there. As part of these laws, sorry, these are a bit text heavy, but definitely have a read later on. As part of the law, it talks about with image-based abuse, it talks about intimate images. And the reason I've got this here is just because I think that the definition of intimate is really good to know, because most of us probably think of nude, partly nude, showing genitals or bottom, or people engaging in private activities as being an intimate image. But the one down the bottom is the one that I think is really important, is looking at people who are without their religious or culturally significant clothing. If they would normally wear it in public, if that's getting shared around non-consensually, that is classified as an intimate image as well, and fits in with these image-based abuse laws. Under these laws as well, as you can see there, so images and videos, they can be real, but they can be altered, so they can be deep fakes. If they're shared with people who they think it could be a certain person, they think it's you, and when it's not. So sending those, tagging those around with your name and making people believe it is you, that fits into this category as well. And if it's, posted or shared widely on social media, or if it's on websites, or if it's in direct messages as well. So all of those cover the image are covered in the image-based abuse laws. And again, I've just got that highlighted to again remind you that this includes AI. So the altered images includes AI because young people probably aren't photoshopping as much as people were many years ago. So in terms of how I would break this down for young people, so some of these slides are slides that we use with young people, so the language there is hopefully more accessible for them. So breaking down the laws for them is to let them know that the laws are there to protect young people. That's the goal. It's not to punish them, it's to protect them. If anyone's experienced harm at any age, they have the right to seek help. Consent's always required when it comes to sexting and sexual content online. There's different laws that are going to fit different situations. Unfortunately, there's no one size fits all, which is frustrating for them as young people. Every situation has that independent treatment, which is why I have to always say, I'm not a lawyer, I'm a teacher. And so you can't ask me too many legal questions because I can't answer them for you because it depends on the person. And reporting doesn't automatically lead to legal action as well, because sometimes that's a thing that will halt a young person from reporting is they go, well, if I report, I'm going to go through this legal process, but they can report it and it's not always a guarantee it's going to go through those processes they might be trying to avoid. So with artificial intelligence as again, umbrella term is technology that is performing tasks that used to require humans to do it. So most of us probably access it through Siri or Alexa or Hey Google or things like that throughout the day. Generative AI is a little bit different. So generative AI, the eSafety definition there talks about it, that it is processes where the machine learns to create digital content that is like new. So it can create new text, new images, new audio, new videos based on all the sources that are online. So it has the ability to create content that maybe hasn't been seen or hasn't existed before, which can be as simple as having a cat ride a shark, but can also be things like having people and their images altered too. And yes, cat riding a shark is the best example I can think of at this time of day. The potential harms of generative AI is that it can and has been used to generate child sexual exploitation and abuse material. It can also generate sexual content of adults without their consent. So it's not always about thinking about risks for young people. There are potential risks for adults, especially we've seen teachers or people working with young people have been targeted by generative AI before in terms of deepfakes, using those images for that blackmail or sextortion and then using them to impersonate people as well. So there are definitely some harms linked to AI, but always trying to have a balanced conversation and not be negative all the time is that the potential benefits of AI is that it's actually also the tool that we can use to detect and moderate the harmful content that's been created. So it can both create the content and it can detect the content. It helps sometimes to with the evidence. So it's easier to understand to meet the needs of young people because it gives it to us in a way that is understandable for them and it can give it to us quickly and at a larger scale. And it can also enhance learning opportunities and digital literacy skills. So young people are using it in really interesting ways when it comes to schools or assessments and things. And some schools and universities are finding ways to embed AI rather than try to get rid of it entirely when it comes to work that young people are doing. I think it's really important to separate where people can go if they have questions versus if they need to report something, because talking about reporting all the time is very like high level if something bad happens. But what if someone just wants to talk about sexual content online? They've got questions that they want to ask. Who do they go to? So they can go to some medical or healthcare professionals. When people have more of a medical lens, maybe sexual content online might not be their specialty area, but maybe talking to certain counseling therapists, psychologist services, they could be helpful. Going and asking questions of a trusted adult, whether that's someone at home or someone in a community, and then going to people at school as well and asking them those questions. Hopefully those spaces are a little less, I guess, intimidating than maybe some of the reporting lines can be. Because with the reporting, the first place to go is in the app. Reporting in the app is really helpful because it will create timestamps and usernames will be recorded. So it's good for evidence collection. Talking to trusted adults in that school is also a way to report, not just to ask questions. And then the main big groups down the bottom, so the Australian Centre to Counter Child Exploitation, Office of the eSafety Commissioner, and going to local police as well. So They all have different powers in different capacities. They have powers to be able to remove content from online, and they can also help if young people report something in an app and the app doesn't take action. eSafety can kind of kick the app into gear a bit more and get them to actually, do something about what's happening. And then a specific one that I've got here because it focuses on being able to remove sexually explicit images um, without necessarily having to go to the police or things like that, because again, sometimes young people aren't going to be comfortable going through law enforcement processes. This site here, Take It Down, is a great resource. They use technology to create like a fingerprint of an image, and therefore they can kind of take down large chunks of that image if it appears online. So it's obviously not going to like get rid of all the images because if people reshare it, it kind of changes things, but it's a really interesting bit of technology and a really helpful resource to know about as well. If young people are reporting, specifically this is coming from eSafety. So if they're reporting to eSafety, there is a bit of a list of things to tick off if they're going to make a report. So knowing the service or platform that was used to share or send the harmful content, having links where it appeared, usernames of the accounts or URLs of the profiles, times and dates of the content, screenshots or screen recordings of the content, and any other information they think is relevant, which is unfortunately a long list and a lot to tick off. And in the moment of people being stressed or worried about things, it's pretty hard to think through all of this. But if we can have the conversations early and be informing people, hopefully it makes it a little bit of an easier transition if it's required. If they don't have all of these things, eSafety are still going to do their best to help out, but there's sometimes only so far that they can go if they don't have all the right information. When it comes to keeping information, it's just a note that yes, here it says about screenshotting and screen recordings. That's for the young person. People over 18, trusted adults should not be keeping any screenshots or screen recordings of sexual content that might contain people under the age of 18, because then they might be in possession of child sexual abuse material. We have had cases where we've heard about trusted adults sharing stuff in school WhatsApp groups, and then everyone in that WhatsApp group is now in possession of child sexual exploitation material or child sexual abuse material. So it's just really important to remind people who are over 18, they don't need a copy of the screenshot or the screen recording. The young person can keep that. And then the police are the ones that are able to go through, or the eSafety Commissioner maybe can go through that process. It's just really good to know and important to note. Young people can make verbal reports to us. We can write it down, but we don't need copies of the images or the videos. So how can we work with young people in this space? One of the questions that guides me to work out what I'm looking for is what makes viewing pornography specifically safer for adults compared to young people? What skills do people over the age of 18 have that people under the age of 18 don't have when it comes to this media literacy or porn literacy or this kind of critical consumption? I would say that I am yet to come up with a good, solid list of skills that adults have that young people don't in this space. But I think that when I'm thinking through the skills that I want people to have, it's helping me to formulate ideas of lessons. So mainly it's those critical consumption skills and the ability to work out how things could impact them if they're not thinking about it in a critical way. But I think there are a lot of people who are over 18 who don't possess those skills, but they have the free, wide access to this content. Um, I don't know if when people are looking at sexual content online, they're dancing like this guy here, but he's just helpful to have on the screen for something a bit different. Some of the key messages that come across when we're talking with young people about pornography as well is they often get that message of real and fake. And it's something that a few people in the space we're trying to work towards getting away from, because when we talk about something being real or fake, if a young person sees a sexual practice that they're interested in or a body that looks like theirs represented in pornography and they've been told it's real and fake, and they're said that porn's fake, well, then that sexual practice that they're interested in and that body that looks like theirs is also fake. So the kind of underlying message that it's giving across is not the best for the young people and can increase that shame and stigma around their own bodies or the practices. So it's trying to just talk about there's, sex that's happening in pornography or there's sex that's happening between people, but trying to take away terminology, especially like fake. Some of the other messages that we see are messages about pornography making people bad partners, not showing safer sex. It's always going to be violent. Bodies aren't real. Sex isn't real. Young people are exposed. So as I said before, exposed versus encountered. The language is important there. Heteronormative discussions around the acts that people see. So with the discussion of anal there, sometimes people discuss that anal sex in pornography has led to heterosexual people engaging in it when it's not something that they would normally want to engage in or enjoy, which is a very heteronormative discussion that kind of doesn't focus on the pleasure-focused discussion we have thought about. And I know it's only one dot point there, but there are also voices that say that pornography is for everybody and everyone should access it and it's safe and good for all people, which again, everyone's different, everyone's an individual. And so that's never going to be the case that we can make a blanket statement like that. But if we know that these are the messages that we're getting, again, we can try to work to be a bit more neutral with our messaging and a bit more just fact-based and clear with our messaging, rather than making some statements that are possibly a bit more values-focused or maybe not completely based in fact at times. It's also in that discussion of values of good versus bad. So, in the same way, if we're talking about good and bad, if a young person hears that it's good to not watch porn and it's bad if you do watch porn, or the other way around, again, they're going to take that in and say, well, I am good or I am bad for the practices I've engaged in. Porn just is kind of the message that we talk about a lot. It just exists. And so it's something we need to talk about. It doesn't have to come with these values-based discussions. Sometimes parents and carers are going to add these values-based discussions in. That's part of being a family. But as educators, we want to try and, as I say, be neutral and fact-based where we can. So when young people are accessing pornography, we've talked about this before with the research, but this is a bit more of kind of how we might look at it with the young people. So showing them that, we know it's present in their online worlds. They are accessing it in different ways, and it can be through choice. It can be through encounters that are intentional or unintentional. So showing both sides of the consensual and non-consensual realm. When talking about being critical thinkers, we can point to some of the stuff that they put out in the research and say if young people are seeing it without engaging those critical thinking skills really thoroughly, they might get some not great ideas about consent, because consent's not always shown in pornography, even though it is a consensual practice and people have agreed beforehand, but they're not seeing it in the actual video itself. The gender stereotypes can still come through, expectations, the shoulds around sex, and those shoulds around intimate relationships as well. So by alerting them to these facts or highlighting these facts for them, again, it means that if they do make decisions where they will watch pornography or see pornography, they'll have a lens to be able to take on board, messages that they want to take on board, but maybe not take on some of the messages that can have not great impacts for them. When we talk about critical thinking, some of the, again, language to help young people with critical thinking is the content that's being viewed legal or is it ethical? Because two different discussions and might impact how they feel about it. Who created the content? Like, what was the purpose behind the creation? Are they trying to get a certain message across or target a certain audience? What values or lifestyles or points of view are represented, or which ones are hidden that we can't see because we haven't looked further into who it's been created by? And how do I, as an individual, feel about this? Do I feel good watching this? Do I feel bad watching this? And this is general critical thinking skills, but also relevant when we're talking about sexual content online. This media literacy toolbox that comes from Media Literacy Now, I think is a really nice framing for talking about these discussions, because it has the decoding, so the critical thinking of the media messages. It has assessing the influence, so how could it impact me or how could it impact my behaviors if I'm not aware of these messages. But the last one's really important because it's the one that we're usually missing, which is how can I create media thoughtfully, conscientiously, ethically, legally? And again, that can be talking about sexual content, but it can just be general online behaviors. So I think that third one is one that is really important to add into the conversation a bit more. But having this framework, we have used it in terms of how we structured some of our sessions and kind of worked through it in these three parts. And it's been really helpful for the young people to approach it in that way. A very tangible and specific activity that we use is this activity here, looking at what personal information can be seen in the photo. Now, the name on the soccer ball is Leon. I had nothing to do with this. I went to the Australian Federal Police's Think You Know resource and found that this was the name of the young person. And every time I present it now, I've got to explain that we're not the same person, even though I look just as young as Leon in this picture. But in this picture, we ask the young people, we say, what can you see? And they'll tell us. You can see the name on the soccer ball, you can see the school they go to, you can see exactly where they are as well. So there's lots of personal information in this photo that if a young person was to post it online publicly, people would be able to work out a lot of information about them. So to try to remove the personal information, there are things that we can do. Now, young people always focus on like the technology based interventions of blurring, adding smiley faces or emojis over certain things, but there are also just like physical changes that you can take with the photo. So framing it differently. So removing some of the identifying information about location, rolling the soccer ball around. I mean, I think this is an entirely new shirt, but finding a way to cover up the school logo as well. The thing that we still have here is the color of the uniform, which uniform colors are repeated across Australia, but it can still give us a bit of a pinpoint about where the young person might go to school. And we can see that they're outside, and sometimes the young people pick up on you can see the color of the leaves, so you can maybe tell what time of year it is. So the message that comes across a lot of the time at the start of school years is about posting photos in black and white. Because people want to post pictures of young people for their school photos and their school uniform, all those things. Going to black and white is kind of the best case we've got if people are determined to post a picture because it removes the most information possible, while still showing faces and things like that as well. So that's as I said, a tangible activity that we do with young people and that you could definitely do with them as well. And so, in terms of what we can do and what we can focus on, being proactive in conversations around sexual content online early. So, talking with young people about if they see pictures of naked people online or people doing things that make them feel certain ways they want to talk about it with a trusted adult. And then as you get older, you can talk more explicitly and give them definitions of pornography and stuff as well. Encouraging questions generally about sex, sexuality, and relationships so that you're covering the whole area, making them feel more comfortable to talk about it when it's technology based, and helping young people become critical consumers of media because there's lots of covert education that happens through media and much wider media. So movies, TV, streaming services, music, they all have ways of teaching about sex, gender, and sexuality. And so we need to think about critical media skills across the space. It's also really important to include parents and carers in these conversations because they're the ones that have the most time with their young people a lot of the time. And so we want to make sure that they're included and they feel skilled and upskilled to be able to have these conversations as well. And I think there's a lot more that's happening in that space in the next, couple of years. So a couple of final messages. So RSE is no longer abstinence only. We moved away from that a while ago, and education around sexual content online or pornography needs to move in the same direction. So we need to make sure we're just providing information, facts, education, so that young people can make up their minds within, as I said, legal and ethical bounds. But it's rather than just not talking about it at all, because that's a problem in itself. This is a really great quote from a really great person, Leon Huxtable. I just wanted to kind of put into words, I guess, how I feel about some of the discussions is that the potential risks and harms that we talk about when it comes to sexual content online or online activity, it's not mitigated by banning access or abstinence. It's mitigated or assisted by education. And we know that education is the answer to so many things. And so we need to keep putting funding into it. But we also need policies, we need frameworks, we need support, we need like federal, community, local government support to be able to do this in the best way possible to help keep young people safe and help protect young people, because that's the end goal here, at least for me, in terms of these discussions. That is a quote that does not come from any research paper, but does come from a thought I had in the shower and then I emailed to myself. So I think it counts as like a publication at this point in time. So what's Leon said over the last 50 minutes? Rethinking how we talk about sexual content online, the language that we use, the definitions that we use, and the approach that we take to try and reduce shame and stigma and just provide clear education for young people. Center young people in the conversation. I always want to hear from young people. I want to know what they're thinking, what they're feeling about the content. I want more research with young people. There are so many barriers to talking to people under the age of 18 about sexual health in general, but we really need to try to get as much as we can from the young people to target them at that time and provide everyone, not just young people, everyone with skills to navigate sexual content online in a way that is safer for them. So to take away your reflection. You've got your other reflection from the beginning, but now after we've gone through discussion, how can this information inform discussions that you'll have with young people, parents, carers, and other professionals, both in your personal and professional capacity? Oh, I hit a button. These last few slides I will very much breeze through. And so if you've got questions, we'll have about 5 minutes that I can answer questions. And if you want to put them in the chat, please do, and I can answer those for you. So some resources. This is a resource that Sexual Health Victoria has that kind of has a bit more of like a one-pager of all the stuff we've talked about in how to talk about sexual content online without shame or stigma with young people. We've also got Durex has a really good series. It's called The Real Sex Guide. There's some great videos there about pornography that talks about that language of real versus fake. And so the sex that happens in pornography is real. So we've just got to think about how we talk about it. Practical Guide to Love, Sex and Relationships. It's been around for a while, but is still a relevant, great resource from La Trobe. eSafety's got their best practice framework, which schools can embed and helps them with their approach to safety online. SECA has some great resources for people living with disability to be able to go through discussions and uses great images and makes it a lot easier to understand. Seekin is a great resource from Canada that is a curriculum that has some really really great ways of talking about sexual content online for specific age levels that I would love us to replicate in Australia as well. This is a framework from Australia about healthy pornography. I don't think I've mentioned it yet, but again, in terms of terminology, healthy, by putting some things in a healthy category, it inherently puts other things in the unhealthy category. But this is what was decided upon by the panel of what makes, safer or healthier pornography for people to view. And then finally, Sexual Health Victoria, we've got our website, lots of resources there that you can definitely explore. We've got our social media that you're welcome to go through and explore, and you'll see my face there a bit more as well. And then a great article written by two great people, Leon Huxtable and Anne Atchison, which is a little bit out of what I'm talking about here today, but it's about some other work with migrant and refugee communities in Australia too. So that's available to you and to boost the read numbers. We got there. Great stuff. Okay, let me see over here. Felicia, you've hit me in the terminology that I'm still working on. It's really hard to not use the word fake or fantasy when we're talking about pornography versus real world discussions or real world sex. So it's about trying to find other ways of talking about it because the bodies in pornography, the sexual practices in pornography, they are real. It's just that they have been produced, they've been scripted, or they've been staged in a certain way. And so maybe I'm looking at talking about staged or scripted, produced. Maybe those are the words that I'm going to replace fake with. And then talking about, again, also trying to avoid the terminology of real, but talking about interactions between people in I don't know, the space that they're existing in, bodies coming in contact with bodies rather than viewing or listening to things on the screen. So I wish I had a better answer for you, Felicia, because when I get the right answer, I'll be rich. If you come up with it before me, please let me know. But I think it's just finding other ways around the word fake. Yes, thank you, Deborah. The performative versus non-performative is one that I've thought about before. The only reason I struggle with it is because like sometimes people, I guess, in their own lives are going to engage in sex that would be considered performative or that they are doing in a performative way. So I struggle with that. But sex for an audience versus sex with another person, that's I think that's not a bad way of describing it as well. But yeah, I get stuck on terminology a lot because there's a lot of terminology in this space, and it's hard because academics use terminology that we don't sometimes use with the young people, and so it's going between the two. I think there's probably still time for one or two more questions, but if you don't get a question through, there's my email. You're always welcome to email me at my work email, and there's my full name for my LinkedIn if you want to find me there as well. But yeah, if there's any final questions, otherwise, I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you and for SERSH and University of Melbourne organising this webinar and for Sexual Health Victoria and supporting me to come and present to you as well. So Very appreciative and hope that you were able to take something fun away at, almost 5 o'clock on a Thursday, which is a time to present, I'll tell you, but here we are and we loved it.
Thank you so much, Leon. That was fabulous. Everyone's saying in the chat, and I agree, very balanced and considered. I am almost 100% sure that you did insert yourself in AI throughout that presentation, with your name and funny photo of the bearded man. It is 5 o'clock. Thank you so much. If you are still around in the chat and you do want a copy of these slides, I won't necessarily know who has attended today, so feel free to shoot an email through to the search admin email address, and we'll get those to you. I'm just putting that in now. Thank you so much. Bye.